Good evening and welcome to one more lecture in our leadership lecture series featuring alumni. Our speaker today is Mr. K. Shankar, who's 71 BTech Mechanical alumnus and currently with Technip. I think you have all seen his bio, so I'm not going to repeat that. I do want to just mention a couple of things. Shankar is a long-time friend and benefactor of IIT Madras. He has been also trying to provide some good placement opportunities for our students. Actually, a couple of years ago, we sent out an SOS because in chemical engineering, placement was not so good, particularly for our MTechs. So we arranged an interaction session with our alumni. And Mr. Shankar was one of the people who came, and he made an on-the-spot offer of employment to 2 of our MTechs, same evening. Of course, the aftermath of the story, maybe I'll let him talk about it, but at least he made the offer, and the students did join the company. So he's, like I said, he's someone who's very positively inclined towards our institute and tries to help us whenever we ask him. More recently, he was also instrumental in IIT Madras winning a $50,000 award from Air Products and Technip as one of the research partner universities. I think there are only 2 or 3 around the world, and IIT Madras was one of them. The $50,000 have now been given to the Petroleum Engineering Department, and we are in the process of, or they are in the process of defining a couple of research projects that will be executed using this funding. And hopefully this will be the seed funding for many more projects and other collaborative efforts between Technip and IIT Madras. So again, I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Shankar to our lecture series, and I invite him to give his talk.
So thank you, Professor Nagarajan. Ladies and gentlemen, I was a little skeptical coming over here because last time I came, he asked me to take 2 people. So he said, I asked him, what is the audience like? He said, it'll be quite a good, this one maybe about 50 to 60 people. So I thought whether I'm going to the end of it, going to have to pick up some people. That's besides the point, but anyway, it gives me great pleasure to be here again. I was just talking to my colleague from the 71 batch, Mr. Gopal, that is here, that we listened last time, and we were students over here, lectured by Nobel laureate Niels Bohr over here. So CLT is very famous for us and very fond in our memories. We have the annual quiz programs in this particular hall over here. And so that is, when we studied, it was called Mardi Gras at that time. Now it's called Sarang, I think. So it brings back a lot of memories over here that when I come to this particular hall to talk. So today's talk, what I thought is I'll make it a little general. First, I was told that I have to address chemical engineering students. So I thought, okay, what should I talk from chemical engineering? Because I spent all my professional life in a process industry. So how many of you are from chemical engineering background here? Okay, that's good. Okay, so it'll be more things. But anyway, I tried to make it general so that I was told other students also could come in over here. So before we start the real topic over here, I thought some of you should really know about which industry I come from and which company I represent over here. You may have gone into the webs of Technip to get the details, but let me give you a brief, just 3 or 4 slides I'll do about Technip Group worldwide. And then I will just do 2 slides about Technip India, what we do in India. And then we'll get on to the topic over here, a bit of advice. Okay? So let's start. So the Technip Group is a worldwide international group over here where energy is our core of our business over here. We are headquartered in France, and we operate both on engineering contracting. We are also on process side. We've got technology with us over here, and very strong in project management. We do very, very major projects over here. The recent project what we have got is 20 billion euros. This is in the Arctic side, because today the search for cheap oil in the world and gas is almost gone. So you have to go to very, very harsh places to look for oil. You got to look under the sea. So under the sea, 4.5 kilometers, you got to look for oil. You got to look for oil in the Arctic over here, where we are doing the Arctic at the moment. It's minus 45 degrees centigrade over here. And we have a window of only maybe about 30 days in a year where it doesn't snow. So it's very, very difficult over here. No construction tools can get into this place. So everything has to be done on a modular platform. So modules almost close to 400,000 tons of modules. And these modules are self-propelled. So you put it from the ship and they have to just go there, and like a Lego system over here, it gets locked in over here. So that is a type of engineering what we are faced today when we search for oil and gas in this world. So we got about 38,000 people, as you said, 109 nationalities, and we operate in 48 countries. We are hooked up right through in the world. And we've got a lot of vessels over here. We got assets basically on yards and on vessels over here. We've got about 36 vessels and 7 under construction. And we got a backlog of almost close to 16 billion euros. So we are basically divided into 3 segments over here. We are divided into the subsea, offshore, and the onshore. In the subsea, basically over here, as I told you, we are the only country, only I think very few people in the world, I think maybe maximum another person is just about reaching to work 4.5 kilometers below the sea. So you have in this terminology over here, you have the near shore, which is maybe about close to about 60 to 80 meters water depth. And then from there you go to 1.5 kilometers, which is called the offshore. And then you go deep offshore is beyond that over here. So in the subsea part of it over here, we design and manufacture both flexible and rigid pipelines. In India today, there is no flexible flow lines at all. Everything is rigid flow lines. So we are trying to slowly change the concept of ONGC to show him the advantages of flexible pipelines in the world. In Gulf of Mexico and similarly in the west coast of Africa, we have flexible flow lines, which is much more easier to operate and even to install over here, and more cheaper than rigid pipelines. We are got our own factories to make umbilicals. We control 70% of the market share in umbilicals over here. And we've got 5 spool bases over here in the world in this particular segment. And we've got a lot of ships who can operate at 60 to 80 meters, who can operate in different parts of the world to lay these particular pipes over here. You can just imagine a pipe which is roughly about close to nearly about, let's say, 2 feet or 1.5 feet, let us say, in diameter, and thickness of maybe about 40. These are rolled, like how we roll threads over here. This is rolled in rolls as big as this particular building. So this is taken over here, rolled in the particular factory, and then moved to the particular spot, and then we lay this down over here. In the offshore area over here, we basically, as I told you, we operate in this particular segment close to 1,500 meters. And we have basically doing the entire engineering for these particular parts. We've got our own yards to make these particular big jackets and topsides. One of the unique features in this particular segment is that since it's very difficult when you do an offshore platform, you put the, let us say the jacket, maybe 4-legged jacket over here, and on top of that you have to put the top deck. So doing the top deck weighing about close to nearly 10,000 tons, you need to have a heavy lift equipment in the sea. So Technip has found and has patented his own methods by which you do a float over. So you bring it on a ship and on a barge, and you go over these particular jackets, and then you buoy it down, and then it comes down over here. It's very difficult to do because if you don't do it properly, it gets stuck 10,000 tons in high seas over here in very rough conditions, becomes very difficult. And we are doing today the floating FLNG over here. Floating FLNG is a new business. It was just 5 years back. Many people thought this idea was crazy. This is basically getting into areas of the world where there are trapped gases and you're unable to get it onto the shore. So you have a ship and you have a chemical plant on top of it, and you take the ship over here on top of these particular fields, and then directly connect with our flexibles. And then you produce the LNG over here, and then you ship it through motherships, from the mothership to feeder ships to the shore. In the onshore, basically it's a traditional part of here. we have gas treatment and liquefaction, LNG. We've done most of the major LNG plants in the world. And we have gas to liquids, the new technology from Sasol. We do that. Oil refining is basically our backbone in this particular area. And the recent acquisition of Stone & Webster. Stone & Webster, if you know, is one of the dream companies on process technologies in the world over here. So we bought Stone & Webster just a year and a half back, and we've got their entire technologies from Stone & Webster, mainly in ethylene and olefins and petrochemicals over here. We control 70% of the ethylene market in the world. And we are basically into non-oil activities, metals and mining, and also biofuels and renewables. So this is the three segments in which we operate as Technip. So as Technip India over here, we are 2,700 strong, and we've got 3 centers operating. We got a center in Chennai, which is adjacent. We share Raj Bhavan as a common property between IIT, Raj Bhavan, and then we have Technip India. We have about close to about 1,061 people. And this center is basically looking after fertilizer business, chemicals, petrochemicals, then the offshore FLNG, and we have the subsea section over here. So this is in Chennai, while in Delhi, we again have close to 1,000 people over here, but they are basically looking at the refinery business, and they also do some petrochemicals, and LNG basically on the regas part of it. As you know, there are a lot of regas terminals coming up in India. So we are basically looking at this particular market. And Mumbai is just a recent acquisition, just started maybe about 2 years back. And here we are trying to do the jacket design of offshore. So offshore is there, then all the new parts over here, metals and mining, life sciences, renewable energy, and we have got a joint venture with Areva, and we are just hoping that the policy is right. So once when it goes, you'll have in Maharashtra, you'll have a big this nuclear power plant over here. So that will be done with JV between Technip and Areva, and this office is going to be in Bombay. So just to give you a flavor of what is happening, just as a crow flies, maybe about not even 1 kilometer from here. We are basically doing over here in Technip India over here. We are doing the refinery. This is basically done from our Delhi office over here. Some work is also being done from here. This is Reliance is putting up a world-class cracker, ethylene cracker, of 1.4 million tons per annum. The beauty of this particular project is that the feed for this particular unit is coming from the off gases, which was normally being just sent off. So they are basically liquefying the off gases, and we get from at least 1/3 of that we get directly on ethylene, and 2/3 of that we extract the ethane, and that ethane goes to this particular cracker, and it's being done for the first time in the world over here. So a waste product is being converted to a useful product of this one, of close to ethylene, what we get over here. And from ethylene, you get the downstreams in Reliance. It's so huge, this plant over here, it's unbelievable over here. The furnace alone of this plant, the cracker furnace, if you take, it's almost close to 45 to 50 meters tall. In 1970s, when we started on this particular ethylene technology, you had only crackers which are only hardly about 5 to 8 meters tall. So you can just see the gigantic size in which people are working over here. So 80% of the engineering is being done from our office in India. Here in Chennai, what we are doing is we are doing the PTA plant, that's a purified terephthalic acid. And the first time in the world that BP is licensing this to an individual company called JBF in Bombay. And this is a $400 million project, what we have to do on a lump sum turnkey over here. And BP's technology is a technology compared to the competitors, where you have a capex advantage of almost 30%, and similarly an opex advantage almost equivalent to 30%. So it's a huge difference if you get this particular technology over here. So this is being done totally from Chennai over here. I told you about the largest FLNG plant over here. To know the size of this particular ship, this is the largest floating body in the world. It's 0.5 kilometer long. It's about close to 80 to 90 meters wide, and it's about 100 meters tall. So we have just finished the hull of the ship, and we have floated it over here. So it's in Korea over here, and on top of Korea, we are basically putting all the chemical plants over here. So this can produce about 5.3 billion tons of LNG, and also some condensates and LPG. So half the engineering, it's two major centers, because too big a job for us over here. So the two major centers of Chennai, of the world, in Chennai and in Kuala Lumpur, we did the engineering. But the bulk of the engineering, maybe 60% of the engineering, was done out of this office in Chennai. And if you want to know the cost of this particular part, it's roughly about close to about 8 million euros, 8 billion euros over here. And Shell is the first company to do this, and they have contracted for making 3 types of ships. The ship is going to be placed in the northeastern part of Australia, about 250 kilometers from Perth, and it's going to extract LNG over here. And the last part is the HRD process platform, what we are doing. We are doing it in collaboration with AFCONS and a yard in Thailand. And this is going to be almost the second float over in India, which is going to take place over here. This jacket is about 4,500 meters, and the top side is 8,500 meters. So that gives you a brief idea of what we are, what we do, and where we are. So let's come down into the basic part over here. So what can I just, when he said this chemical engineers, okay, I was just thinking, what can a mechanical engineer talk to a chemical engineer? I think you are better. I can't talk on chemical analysis or stoichiometry and things like that. But basically, having worked in a process industry, and for the last 4 decades over here, and I had the opportunities of working with chemical engineers, both with under first chemical engineers, then with chemical engineers, and then at the end leading a group of chemical engineers. So I've learned, got a good experience learning with what chemical engineers do, and how they come up in this particular profession over here. So I thought basically I will basically talk on this particular subject over here, and give you basically, since some of you may get into the process industry in some point of time, because not all of you will get into the process industry. Some of you may get into the factories, or maybe getting into the engineering things, but I think quite a good number these days, I was told, go to IIMs and go to other doing an MBA course. So if you happen to come over here, I think we need to really understand what this industry is. And I thought from that perspective, I could give you just a couple of, let us say, bits of my personal experience, which could be turned into a bit of advice. So if you take it, I think it could stand you in good stead. It's not only for chemical engineers, but I just try to make it a little general so that we could give it for all the other people who have come here today. But some of the examples what I talk will be mainly talking from the point of view of a process industry, because I've had the opportunity of working in a process plant most of my life over here with Southern Petrochemicals. From the time it started, so from the college we went to Southern Petrochemicals, set up Southern Petrochemical plants in India and outside India. And then when we wanted to go into engineering, we moved into engineering, set up the engineering division, and then had the joint venture with world-renowned Technip over here. So I know both sides of the, let us say, the industry, both from the owner-operative point of view, as well as from the point of view when you design the chemical plants over here. So let's start over here with what can we really do. So the first part over here is, today we should really understand that when we talk about a chemical plant over here, it's a very, very dangerous plant. It's very, you have gases and very toxic fumes, and you have temperatures up to 1200 in, let's say, ethylene furnace, you have 1200 degrees centigrade. You can come down also minus 104 when you talk of, let's say, ethylene when you want to talk, or LNG you talk maybe 160 minus over here. You have pressures as high as 300 bars over here, and you have also very cases where you have to work in a confined area. So things are not very, very, let us say, good over here in a chemical plant. So lot of things are basically devoted to safety over here. from the time I joined this particular industry after college in 71 till now, it has been a huge jump in terms of safety. So if you are not looking at safety from that point of view, you are going to get into a very serious trouble over here. So how did this all start about over here was way back in the early part of the 20th century. You must have heard of a company called DuPont. So DuPont was basically making explosives over here. And one fine day, the entire factory blew up over here and a lot of lives were lost. And from that time, the management of DuPont set together and made a set of rules which is today become the bedrock of this particular safety industry over here to make plants very, very safe over here. Though of course today we have some very horrific experiences on big accidents taking place in this chemical industry. This particular rule book has made people think, are we really ensuring that the people who come to work in this industry, they come safe and they go back safe? So from this point of view, Technip over here is basically having a program. They did about 4 years back, we started. It's a program called Pulse, just to know the pulse of the people. Because finally at the end of this exercise, it is basically the people who are going to say whether the plant is safe or not. So from this point, we started with the Aberdeen University over here, and we wanted to know what is the level of safety consciousness in our company. We have 38,000 people, as I told you. So we interviewed all of them. We gave a questionnaire. This university did a total research on this. And to our, not to our surprise, we found that roughly only about 40% of our people are basically safety conscious. People said that the schedule is more important, so we have to rush to do the job. People said the budget is tight, so we need to cut corners and come there. So then we started doing an exercise of teaching them the value systems of safety over here, because the basic objective of our company was basically to be the reference company in HSE in the world. So we kept DuPont on top over here, and then we started trying to find out. So 4 years later, we found that this 40% level has gone up to maybe about 60% over here. Still, we got a long way to go over here. So this particular campaign is brought a lot of sense to our employees over here to ensure that they are safe. But most of us, we feel that safety over here, most of the accidents take place over here in a chemical plant. And if you see in an office environment, you think it's not a problem at all. But you'll be surprised, the maximum number of accidents take place in an office. And in an office over here, the maximum number of injuries are caused by people who are falling downstairs. Very shocking actually over here, this particular analysis when we had a conference over here in a chemical, let's say, get-together. This was what has come out over here. Because today now with the amount of safety consciousness being brought about, it's pretty safe as long as you wear your type of protective, let us say, apparatus to go into a plant. But today, in an office, not much care is taken on safety. So my first bit of advice to you is safety is absolutely important. And just to wind up this particular section, just look at 6 particular activities that you should never take over here and 6 activities you should always take as far as safety is concerned. So first is never remove safety isolation and equipment barriers. We had a case over here in 1979 in SPIC in Tuticorin, where the steam carbon ratio in an ammonia plant, the operators decided, okay, we'll bypass this and run the plant. They ran the plant for 1 month, and one fine day the entire reformer blew up. The total reformer in the plant, which is the heart of the ammonia plant, if you see, entire tubes had gone. And at that point of time, I was in Japan trying to do a design for a purge gas recovery unit. And I got a call when I landed in Japan telling me that to stop my work and get into the tube factory and ensure that the tubes, 256 tubes, 4-inch high nickel tubes over here, are sent to Tuticorin. So you can just imagine what happens over here if you remove safety barriers over here. Well, alcohol and drugs is things that everyone says that you should never be under the influence of that when you enter a factory or an office. But the next part over here is also very surprising. In a factory, most of the accidents are taking place when people fall not from very major heights, but from 2 meters level. From 2 meters level, people are falling and twisting, and their ankles are fracturing their legs, etc. So this is what happens over here when you are not when you're very high up, then of course you are basically taking all the precautions. But when you feel that's 2 meters, you feel it's nothing at all, and then you start getting into trouble. So never walk under safety loads, never expose yourself to risk of falling objects, and always please never perform a task which you are not trained and competent. So many examples are there, I do not want to get into this, but I think lessons what you can take from this is whichever industry you're going to go to, please ensure that you never take these actions. But what are the always actions you should take? So actions what you should always take are basically always do a performance HSE tool talk over here, and always work with a safety permit over here. And safety permit is one particular part what I feel that when some of you are going into a plant, you have to give us the work permit to do the maintenance. I was in the maintenance side over here. And there are cases over here when the safety permits are given in a hurry, and when we open, we find that it is not a safe environment. Steam gushes out and people get hurt over here. Or it's not fully, let us say, the noxious gases are not being removed, and we get there, we get into various problems over here. So always perform HSE tool talk and work with permits or safe systems. And authorization, when you enter closed places over here, you have to necessarily ensure that you are always entering with authorization. Today the big ships, what I told you over here, when you go to Korea, etc., if you want to just go into these particular areas, you have to give a badge and you have to keep it at the entrance. And then you got to go up, and then when you come back, you have to remove your badge. Because at the end of it, people will know, finally the badge is still there, someone has fallen in some part of the big ship over there. So this is absolutely important. And you should always ensure that even if you are not having the authority, if you see an unsafe act, you should always stop this particular act over here, because it could spoil someone's day in this. Always work with correct personal protective equipment, and you observe the speed limits in driving, and always use the correct tools over here. So this is my first take over here as far as things. So always basically ensure that safety is your #1 priority.